It is October 31st, 2006. We are recording at the Blue Ash Library in Cincinnati, Ohio. Present are Mr. Norman Wise, veteran of World War II, currently living at Meadowbrook Care Center on Weller Road in Montgomery, Ohio. Joel Corneli, reference librarian of Blue Ash Library and videographer. Patricia Armacost, daughter of Mr. Wise and chaplain of Meadowbrook Care Center. And me, Kathleen Atkinson, the interviewer. Welcome, Mr. Wise.
Thank you.
We're honored to have you participate in this history project. Please tell us about yourself and your life before you joined the service.
Okay, well, I was a son of a father and mother with 10 kids, and they had 5 boys and 5 girls. And it was a tough way for my dad to go, so everybody was on his own as quick as they could get it. And at 17, I decided to join the CCCs, which is a Conservation Conservative Corps, and I was sent to Libby, Montana to do my work for the CCs. And in Libby, Montana, I learned a lot of things about road building, every cattle guards, everything that a farmer or rancher would need in that area. And I learned to ski in the mountains in Montana. And the other thing that was very important to give you some steps in life was fighting 38 forest fires in 1 year when I was in the CCs, and we went from Montana to California fighting those forest fires. And it was a life that was tough. We got $30 a month, and it was like working for $1 a day. But unless you're in the forest fires like these guys today, you wouldn't know anything about them. And so when I got back from the CCs in 38, I started to work, and I worked at a hide house for a while, and whatever jobs I could get. And later on I went into real estate, but that goes after I got out of the service. So I'd like to go a little bit about the service and where I served.
Yes.
And where I served in the Army, that the first camp I went to was Camp Chaffee, Fort Smith, and that was the 16th Armored Division. But when they come around and they needed people for the 10th Mountain Troop that they just had started, it was 1941 they started, and then when they come and asked about 100 of us in the 16th Armored to join the 10th Mountain, we joined the 10th Mountain, and we were sent to Camp Carson, Colorado. And the Camp Carson, we got our training in, and we were mostly mountain training in Colorado. And when we was done in 44, about May, we were finished with our mountain training, and then it was time to ship us over to Camp Swift, Texas, where the object of our training was to be flat ground training. And in Camp Swift, we did the flat ground training, and you trained for combat, and you trained there in real ammunition being fired over your head on your infiltration courses. And in Camp Swift, we finished the course in about December, and we were sent over to Camp Patrick Henry, and that's where we got to spend the Christmas and New Year's in Camp Patrick Henry for our holidays. And after the holidays, we were sent to Camp uh, uh, Hampton Roads for to ship out
In Virginia.
in Virginia. And the time we had to ship out was January the 4th, 45. And we went from the Hampton Roads and arrived in Naples, Italy in 9 days.
Did you go by ship, sir?
And the ship we went on was one of the fastest ships the United States had at that time, and it was called the USS United States. And it was a nice ship, and it was so fast on the waters that no other ship could escort them. So when we passed any place the United States Air Force was, they would come out and circle over us and make sure we were all right. And when we got there, we got to Naples in 9 days, and from there, it was a matter of getting organized and moving up. And the first night we spent on the ship, and the next day they took infantry training crafts to take us up to Leghorn. And from Leghorn, our 10th Mountain Division moved over to Pisa. And when we moved over to Pisa, that was the start of our training, because we were headed for combat. And in a few days, we were moving up to the front lines. And about 15 days from the time we left the States, we hit our line of combat, and we had our training for combat, and that was only 15 days from the time we left the States. And after that, we start moving up and getting the Germans out of their lookout post, and as we got them out, we moved closer to our main object. And the main object was going to be Mount Belvedere, and the other mountains surrounded it. And Company L, which I was a sergeant, the first squad, and we were moving up, and when we got to the 18th of January, we took and had to move up to the foothills of Mount Belvedere, and not to leave the enemies know we were there. And on February the 19th, 1945, we were ready for our major attack. And the orders came that morning before the attack that day, and the orders was to fix bayonets, no loaded rifles, and only hand grenades. And we then was ready for our major attack, and the attack come on the 19th at 2:30 in the morning. And we started up Mount Belvedere, and I think you have to realize what this was, and I don't think anybody without being there could have knew anything about it. But we made the attack, and the Germans fought, and they landed heavy artillery on us and did everything in their power to hold us back, but we did make progress. And by the next morning, we were up to near the top, and when we were up there, we had to take, and I don't know, and they haven't had no records of how many Germans were killed and how many was taken prisoners. But then we had work to do to expand out and make sure the observation post was all taken up there, and that meant about an extra day. But in less than 2 days, we had taken Mount Belvedere, which was the observation post the Germans had, that overlooked every road going east and every road going north in the valley down there. And when we took the mountain, that gave Mark Clark and the 5th Army an opportunity to start making those advances with the 5th Army, which they couldn't do for months. And to top that off, we found out that after we took the mountain, they said, well, boy, that was a job well done, because the mountain was taken 3 times in '44 by the Allied forces, but it wasn't held. And we took it in 2 days and held it. And then we settled down clearing out up there, and Mark Clark and them was moving up, and we got to going and pushing the Germans back. And pushing the Germans back, we had the second object we had to take, and that was my Company L. And the second object we had to take was a hill going down out of the mountains, which was 913. And in the help on Belvedere, we got our help there from P-47s, which come over and try to silence all the heavy artillery. Same thing happened on Hill 913. Before we had it under control, the P-47s come in, and they did a wonderful job of silencing most of the heavy artillery that was coming in.
Could you say what the P-47s were, sir?
No, the P-47s surprised us because we didn't know we was going to get that support.
Well,
And
was it a tank? Is that what?
No, P-47s are flying airplanes.
Oh, I see.
And I'm sorry, but I meant to say that, but I left it.
That's all right.
But after we had the support from the Air Force, we moved down in 913, and every night when the artillery started, we got to name it the Berlin Blitz, because every night you could expect to be hit with that heavy. And we were in the advancing here, we were in a lot of odds because it was not only cold, but it was heavy snow on that. And until we moved down the road a little and start taking other property, and it was about a 40-mile jaunt down to the highway we rode to Pole Valley. And what we did, our Lieutenant Putman, we took one night 8 men on a patrol, and on them 8 men we went out and found one of the Germans' outposts and killed 4 Germans, and we brought back 1 prisoner. And with that prisoner, he had a diary, and Lieutenant Putman said that information will be good because we passed it on back to G2 and S2 to find out what was true in it and what wasn't. So as we passed along and made advances on the road down to, it wasn't really a road, by the way, it was just a field. And when we rode down the next patrol we went on, it was getting closer to the Germans again because we had them run. And when we got down there, it was a matter of a firefight between the Germans and us. And we had, at that night, we killed 20 Germans and brought back 1 prisoner. And the good part we had of it, none of our troops got hit or killed. So we brought the prisoner back, and he had some information that we were wondering why the Germans had such strong resistance. And we found out when he told us that General Kissering, their general in Italy, when the 10th Mountain got there, he told all the German troops, he said, you better put up your best fight because the 10th Mountain Troops are coming here to enter into battle, and they are ordered not to take any prisoners. So we understood why some of them had thought it was kill or be killed the way they was fighting. So as we moved down towards the highway. We did our patrols and kept the Germans moving, and when we got near the road going down, we got some lucky break from the weather, and that was in March, and it did turn a little spring light, and it was the first time you could dig foxholes since we've been in the battle. So we got some foxholes dug, and when we were ready to be relieved for a day or two, they sent up the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, and they took over our front positions for a day or a day and a half. But then it was a matter of getting back to the road down to the Pole Valley Road, and when we got close to it, we started forming our 3 regiments, and they would take, one would lead, and the other one would follow, and we would follow, and then after a few days, the other one would move to the front lines. And on that, we had around the middle of April, we had reached the Pole Valley Road, and we was under heavy fire, and a lot of us got hit, and we were having trouble with some of the casualties, and behind us was following our wonderful medics, and we were sent back to the medics, some of us that was hit, and when we went back to the medics, they patched us up, and they said, well, you're going back to the front lines, because our general, we were losing so many men, our general had an order back there with the medics, and he told any man that comes back there, any soldier that can carry a gun, he is to report back to the front lines. And that's what we did. And from there, we started, and after we was on the road to Pole Valley, we had another incident come up, and we were moving pretty good and keeping the Germans off. And fact is, we were bypassing the German towns on that road. And then we got into this one little village, and the village was just a few houses, and we were told, my squad said, take this road and hold it and pass the Allied troops through, or the division troops. And we passed them through, but before we took and got to the road, we went back in the houses to search them. And when we searched them, we come up in the back piazza, they called it, where the water come, that the people around that part of the area used the water. We looked over to the door, and out come 4 Germans with their clothes and everything in hand, and their guns over their shoulder. They didn't know the Americans were there yet. And we took the 4 prisoners, and by the time we had the 4 prisoners, down the road, one of the tank battalions had taken a stockade and putting the Germans, as the troops passed and passed their Germans there, they were putting them down in the schoolyard so they could walk around and watch them. So we took the 4 prisoners from there down to the stockade and come back. And the one, can I ask the question?
Sure.
I got one thing here I don't know if we should add or not. We had a priest come up to us when we was in that little village, and he had us, he said, come down, and there was Tedesco down there, Germans. And I told him, I said, we don't have, only a couple of men maybe I can spare, and I'll send them down as quick as I can organize. And what we did, I sent 2 men down to surround the church, because they didn't see any Germans outside. And when they surrounded, did their chore, I'll make it as short as I can, they didn't see nobody, and the man I told, don't get in a fight, he said that he looked around, he went in, and he went in and seen the priest there, and he didn't see no Germans. And he started talking to the priest, and he said, Tedesco, and they were on the altar, 8 dead Germans laid out, naked. And he said, I asked him, well, what did he want? He said, bury him. And I said, what'd you tell him? He said, you know what I told him. So I don't know if that's worthwhile. What do you think?
It's a good story.
Is it?
I like the fact that you're looking around too. The camera isn't the end all, because Miss Atkinson wants to see your face too.
Oh, he said, I want to see your face too, so you don't
Oh.
have to just look at the camera, that you
Okay.
can look
Yes.
around. But
Oh.
he should go with the story?
You
Absolutely.
tell me when you're
The
ready.
camera, it's right in there. I wanted it live.
Okay.
It's already on there. I did not stop the camera.
That's good.
I like your story.
Okay.
It's already on tape. Go to the next story. That's
All
great.
right.
We need to tell that you were sergeant,
Yeah,
because you're saying, you know, that your troops and things.
yeah.
But,
My squad.
yeah.
You're on tape now. Okay. So
There we go.
there we go. Anyway, so that wound up our kind of duty there, and the troops were moving up, so we had to get up and get back with our company. And so by that time, the Allies were having a few trucks, and they couldn't take us because they were moving so fast that you had to run almost to keep up. That's how fast the Germans were running. And this one time when I got hit, and a lot of us got hit, and we had to be patched up. I moved to the back, and when they were done patching us up, they said, back to the front, because the general had told them anybody could carry a gun, report up to the front, and that's what we did. So as we went along, we were passing more and more Italians, and we were picking up a lot of the Italian partisans that wanted to take part in it. And what job we give them was the towns we were passing, we had them organized and tell them to go in and take the German prisoners and make stockades along the way. And we kept moving, and we got to one intersection, and the highway was going straight ahead, and this intersection come dead end into the highway. And all of a sudden, and our company was marching on the road, and all of a sudden we looked up at the road crossing, and here was 2 German officers riding bicycles heading for a building across the road. And about 30 or 40 or 100 guns went off at one time, and we actually shot the bicycles out from under them, and one was killed and the other one died a little later. But the point to this story was how lucky we were, because the building across the street they were heading to was a building, after we investigated, was a tank in there, and with a back window facing right on our highway was the barrel of the tank. And if we had got to there, they would have been able to fire tank shells at us, and they'd have probably put a pretty good hole in us. So we were glad that happened the way it did. Then, along the road as we got further down, here comes Germans out with flowers, eggs, and milk, and wine to greet us. And they had a word for us, and the word that they said was Semprite Avente, and that meant our division was always forward. And they were waving flags and everything, and by that time we were headed.
This was the Germans, sir?
Huh?
The Germans came out to meet you?
No, the Italians.
Italians came out to
from
meet
the towns. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
that's
The
all right.
Italians from the town, and we were gathering more Italian partisans to help in clearing up the towns we bypassed. And now, our big job coming up now was to get to the Pole River. And the Pole River was the next big object. And what that meant, the 10th Mountain, we were so far ahead of anybody else outside of our division. We were first to reach the Pole River. And when we got to the Pole River, one of the engineer bunch was up with us, and they had to scurvy around and take every boat or whatever they could get a hold of to get us across the Pole River. And that meant that the bridge had been taken out, and we had to cross in the boats that they could round up, and some of them were infantry landing crafts, and they took us to the other side of Pole River where we farmed our beachheads, and we were ready to move ahead. And the regiment ahead of us moved up, and then the second, the 87th, and the 86th, and then the 85th, which is our regiment, we start moving up. And the next one, the firefights had dwindled down to where actually the Germans, when they seen us, were turning and going away. But we were headed for a big town named Villafranco on the road. And in Villafranco was an airport. And when we got in there and secured the town, not our regiment, but the other two regiments were there, and they secured the town. And lo and behold, at the airport, which was in Francovilla, here comes a German airplane landing. And with the confusion of an airplane landing after we had taken the town, the German pilot got away and run, and he got away. So on the end of that, we were kind of celebrating. We had the whole town, and we were ready to move on, another assignment. And lo and behold, from a side road, here comes a German convoy. And the machine guns were set up, so the guys did a wonderful job with their machine gun. They set the first two vehicles on fire, and we took 75 prisoners from the rest of the convoy. And then we were ready to move on. So General George P. Hayes decided that the 85th would move up to the North Alpines. And we started that, and on the way up, it was a matter of getting the road work in, and then getting to the foothills where the tunnels run through the mountains. So we was figured to go into the tunnels to get the Germans out of the tunnels. But when we got into the tunnels, all the tunnels as far as we could see, the Germans had done bombed and destroyed practically. So on we went, and in that time, we had at the from the 15th of April to the 19th, we had gone in 15 days on foot and fighting. We had gone 105 miles. So we then our next object was to take and cross Lake Gardia. And Lake Gardia was our next point to go to the Alps. And by this time, the engineers had got amphibious tanks there, and so we got to cross to the Alps in tanks. And when we crossed Lake LaGuardia and crossed the Pole River, both of them, the Germans were actually using anti-aircraft guns to try to hit us, but they were spent before they got to us. So then we went and took the Alps, and that was the last stronghold the Germans had, and last stronghold and route they had to get out of Italy, and we had secured it. And when we secured that, it was about the end of April, and in the next 2 days, the Germans surrendered. And so with the surrender, we was happy. That was on May the 2nd, 1945. So we had a few days rest there, and after the rest, we were ordered over to the other side of Italy because Tito, the general from the Yugoslavian army, decided he was going to take and occupy part of Italy. So we were sent over to let him know that that was no way that he was going to do. So after we got over there, peacefully in a couple of days, he decided to move out. So that left us there in the end of the war, and it gave us some extra time, and lo and behold, they set up all kinds of trips, and the trips were to Florence, Pisa, the Riviera, Venice, and Rome, and Florence, and wherever you wanted to go for the next 3 months. And I guess I should tell some of them, huh?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, in the different things that we did, we took in, and the one, we went to Rome, and Rome, it was a real treat in a way because we got to nosy into everything that we ever heard about Rome, including St. Peter's. And that was one thing that they had, Italian guides there to show you through and answer any question. So we went into St. Peter's, and we was wanting to go in there and then go to Vatican City and look around. And lo and behold, we got in there, we had 2 things that really happened that were something of importance to us. And one was, the guide said to us as we were back in the inside of the church, he said, "How big do you think those statues are down there at the other end of the church?" And we guessed, and we said about maybe 6, 8 feet. So he said, "Okay, we'll go down there and we'll show you." They were 12 and 14 feet high, and it was hard for us to believe. So we were going across to go out to Vatican City, and lo and behold, here comes Pope Pius up the aisle, and right by where I was passing, and I stopped him, and he said, "Oh, American, American, good." And I reached out my hands and shook hands with him. So that was a treat. And from there on, the rest of the thing, we went through Vatican City and looked around, and from my knowledge of Vatican City till I got out in it, you wouldn't believe it was just a little town. It's a big place, and really big. So we left there, and we we're on our own and trying to find places to eat, just have a good time. And I got to associate with a lot of the British, and they were really something, because they say, "Hey, Yank," and they had an expression of their own. And they said, why don't you join us? And I said, okay, I have no objection. What do you want to do? Oh, just look around and maybe later come and eat with us. So got to eat free, but when people talk about the British and the bully beef, it's really bully beef because it's hard to eat. But I got to be good friends with about 6 or 8 of them, and every place I went, they wanted to go. So, and they kept, "Hey, Yank, let's go here." And I said, fine. So we got real good acquainted, and they were wonderful guys. And that one night come up, and all of a sudden they met me there, and they said, "Hey, Yank, tonight's something good. You want to come to it?" And I said, "Yeah, what is it?" They said, we're all celebrating the end of the war now, and we're going to have good dinner and everything. You want to come and dancing and all?" And I said, "Yeah, if you think I'm allowed." They said, "Yeah, you'll be our guest." So went there, and it was a nice party going on, and I was walking around and meeting a lot of the other soldiers there and shaking hands, and a lot of them said, "Boy, you guys did a good job. You're the 10th Mountain, boy." And all of a sudden, the guy tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "What are you doing here?" I turned around, and here it was General Montgomery, the British general. And I said, "Sir, I'm just here with these nice guys. They invited me. We've been roaming around Rome for a few days together, and they said, 'Hey, Yank, you want to go over there tonight?' And I said, 'If you're allowed.' He said, 'Well, have a good time.' So anyway, then after all that, we reported to out to go, and on August the 10th, we shipped out on the Marine Fox for home. And the Marine Fox got into New York, Irvington on the Hudson, and we went to all the fort, Camp Shank, I think it was, and we were discharged to go home for a 30-day leave, and then report back to Camp Carson, because when we got back from the leave, the furlough, really 30 days, we were shipping out to Japan, and that was all in the orders. So we went on our furloughs, but the time I got into Cincinnati, lo and behold, the Japanese had offered to surrender. So we went and enjoyed our 30-day furlough, and after the 30-day furlough, went back to Camp Carson to be discharged. And when I was discharged on the 30th of October, I went on home, and we had 2 great things that happened. We had our war over, so we didn't have to go back, and we went back to be discharged. And also, after we were discharged, we got to go home, and on top of that, the one thing that I didn't mention as I was talking here, I had, by the time I got through the fighting, I wound up with also frozen feet, and had to worry about that. But when we got home...
Can you tell us a little more details about the frozen feet?
Well, the frozen feet, probably the place I got it was one night we were kind of bedded down, which is hard to do when you're on the front line, but we were bedded down and the guy was over in the trees and he was sitting watching, and that was really his latrine. And he was sitting there, and all of a sudden in front of him come a patrol of 28 Germans that night. And the reason that, and that's right, that's how I got the frozen feet. The reason I got the frozen feet, every time you had a break and you could get your boots off and you could take your 2 pair of heavy wool socks off, it was a treat. So that night we were ordered within 5 minutes to hit the road to go after the German patrol. And I had just taken off my boots and my socks. And he said, "Don't wait to do that, come on." And Lieutenant took the patrol and I put on my boots without any socks. And by the time the next morning we got back, that was my frozen feet. So that explains that. And the other thing, when we got home, we got letters, and this was really a compliment to us. All the division troops got letters of commendation from our General George P. Hayes, General Willis Krittenberger, and General Harold Miller, and General Jacob Devers. And that was really a thrill to us to get a letter personally, each man, and we all got the letter and they complimented us real well for what we had did. And then later on we got some notice in February 1978, I believe it was, and we got a compliment, and the National Board of Directors had agreed that the 10th Mountain Troops from that day on, every year on February the 19th, we would celebrate the 10th Mountain Division Day. And that was what we do every year now. So the other things, do you want me to go into something after I get out, or?
Absolutely, please.
Okay.
But could you tell us, I think you were a sergeant.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, you know, when you're, I'm sorry about that, but when you're fighting a war and you got all men like yourself, it's wonderful, and you don't think about you're the guy that's in command, but I was, and I did take command, and I did have things that were done the way that I wanted them done, because I had the one motto of my own, and other ones used it, but when I set them down and told them, "You're now in my squad, and here's what we do. If you see me fall on the ground or jump on the ground, you better do it, because I'm not doing it for play, I'm doing it because I have to. And I've been around longer than you guys just coming up, so take for granted, the one thing I believe in is this: stay alive in 45. And that gives you a good reason what to do.
Yes.
And the other motto that we had in the 10th Mountain anyway was the other motto that they had. And then after the Italians said that supreme evento meant always forward,
Right.
that's what they wanted to add to our mottos. So the way give me some idea.
How old were you at this time, Mr.
Oh,
Wise?
by the way, I was 22 years old when I went into the service. And there's something Pat was trying to tell me. And,
Oh. Mr.
Um,
Wise, would you please tell us about these things that you've brought?
yeah,
It's a
that,
picture of yourself?
that's, you see me when I was a young man. I was 22 years old, and it was quite an experience. And I also managed to make sergeant, and in the service, when you're sergeant, you have 11 men under you, and you do the best you can to keep all of us as much out of harm as I can.
Yes.
And we only really, in the campaign in Italy, only really lost one of my men from death, but a lot of them replaced, and some of the men in the squad got to go on and be sergeants and corporals too, so I was proud of that. So
That's great.
that's the way it went for that.
That's great. And what is this?
And that is our division monologue or advertisement, I'd say, in a way, and it explains our mottos. And as you see on the one side, the motto that the division has and has used is "Climb to Glory." And on the other side, you see "Stay Alive in 45." Well, I guess just some of us troops, and maybe just out of the blue, that was something we started using, and all of a sudden, that was my motto from then on. And as you see down below, that's the 85th Regiment,
Yes.
and that's only one of the regiment in the 10th Mountain Division.
One of the
because
three, right?
That's one of the three, and you got the 85th, which is us, you got the 86th, and the 87th. And I'll tell you what, if you was to stack up for the combat we did, you wouldn't have to know which one you were from, because they were all just one as great as the other.
That's great.
And our medics, I can't say enough for, because they took and went through a job that was terrific. And as I had mentioned before, in our dead and wounded, and which I hate to even mention, but it's something that has to be mentioned, because those people that have lost them men lost heroes.
Yes, they did.
And the thing I wanted to say is that we did have, sorry to say, we had 992 dead, and we had 4,154 wounded, and I was one of them.
How many total men were there?
Well, the total division, about 16,000.
That was in each one of the three?
No,
Or all
no,
together?
the three together makes the division.
Okay.
And that was the point. They, all three regiments, you couldn't get three better regiments in any division, I don't believe.
Right.
And that's the way I feel. And I still feel that way.
Absolutely, sir. Okay. And this was your
And
uniform?
This is an outfit that you wear in the mountains, and when you're in snow, you naturally have it on the white side. And when you hit open ground or anything besides snow, you take that and change, and it's brown.
Oh,
And they are also waterproof, and this is the page of our division book that lists all our members, and everybody that sees that can hardly believe that you can have something and be in the mountains and have two changes without having any changes.
Right.
And that means one side's one way and the other side's the other. And one note on that, when I was honored down at the Union Terminal, and there's a slip in some of the material I give you, and when they honored me down at the Union Terminal in I think it was in December '04, I had just about a group you couldn't believe of airplane pilots that was doing the honoring us 15 from Cincinnati, and I had more of them over to our table than I think the other ones had for their celebration. And the one thing that all of them had the same question: how in the world did you guys ever survive a couple foot up in the mountains when you 0 or maybe
Right.
even 20 or even 30's cold, and no place to sleep but on that ground?
Yeah,
So that was the way it went.
terrible.
And the other thing, I guess you'll want to hear about these.
Well, what do you hear about those
And
medals?
the other thing is, these are the medals I got from the service. And the medals are from the European theater and that. And my medals were the Bronze Star and the 2 Combat Infantryman's badge, the Combat Infantryman's badge alone, and that badge is given to all troops that fight face to face with the enemy.
Yes.
And then we got the European theater, we got the European ribbon rather, and then we have also the Purple Heart, which is, I don't know.
Can you turn it just a little bit this way? Thank you.
I don't know if anybody knows that, but the man that started the Purple Heart was George Washington.
Oh,
And George Washington made the Purple Heart for people that fought in the Army originally and had kind of outclassed service, good classic service, and they was given an award.
Huh.
But later on, and I'm glad he did, he had that changed, and what he had it changed to is any men in battle that with the enemy and he gets wounded and draws blood, that's the only ones today that get the Purple
yes,
Heart.
Purple Heart now.
They get the Purple Heart. So on top of that, the other, I have to look and see if and the other thing is, by the way, on our 10th Mountain being deactivated, it was deactivated in November '45. That meant that was history. And the other thing that was deactivated at the same time, up in this corner where I got my hand, you'll see our 10th Mountain Division patch. And what that patch is, it shows the mountain on the top, it shows cross bayonets, which we use,
Right.
and it shows the blue for the Pole River.
Okay.
And that's why they named that the Pole Valley, and then the North Alpines, the mountains that we did. So it was something. And if you don't mind, I think now I'd like to sing a song that I wrote. And I wrote this song in the foxholes when I was advancing over in the fight. And I'd like to tell you just a little about it before I sing it. And it was a song that was in my head. And from the first foxhole that I was in in that combat, I'll tell you, because before I got into the first foxhole, we lived hell on that mountain. But when I got in the first foxhole, I said to myself, I said, you know what? What are you thinking about? And I said, I'm thinking about victory. And so as I went, I kept putting that in my head. And really, from the time I was discharged until I was home, and after I was home, I think probably my daughter Pat seen this thing wrote on the back of some real estate papers, and she must have typed it up for me, and all of a sudden it come live again. And so I kept going over it and over it, and until I think 2003 here, I didn't realize how many people were interested in it. And so I started having copies made. And be surprised the copies that and in fact is, we have a gentleman now that has a copy of it, and he wants to have it recorded for me, so I'll be glad to do that.
That's great.
But this song was wrote because it's about the Second World War, and I named the song Victory. And here's the way it goes. V is for the vigor we will show them. I is for invincible we stand. C is for our country and its courage. T is for our troops in every land. O is for onward we are marching. R is for the rule we're bound to show. Y is for the Yankees over there now, and the ones who will have to go. Put them all together, they spell victory, the word we all been waiting so long to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
But that's the way I feel, and I'm glad that we did it. And can I add at the last, can I add my father?
You can add absolutely anything you want.
We've got 3 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to add this to the thing I said, because I like to compliment my family, and I have to start with all my soldiers. My dad was in the Spanish-American War. My 3 brothers was in the Second World War with me, and my 2 sons was in the Vietnam War. And I want to tell you, that's history, and I just love to tell it. And they all did their job, and we're all proud of it.
Yes, we're indebted to you and all your family, and we thank you so much for this. This is going to benefit generations of people in the future to hear your story.
Lives forever, because that kind of thing should.
It should.
And when you lose, and I might add this, when you lose in the Second World War, 100 dead and 670,000 wounded, you've lost a lot of good Americans.
Yes, you have.
Out of the 20,000 we had in the Second World War.
Yes. And you had a beautiful quote for us
Huh?
at the end. You wanted to finish with a quote about thanking a vet.
Oh yes, and I'd like to do this. I wish all Americans that see this would think and enjoy their freedom and thank a veteran.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.